13. In the wake of assumption. The crows sat around their makeshift table, the weight of their recent success still lingering in the air. Tricerium was safely secured in the hideout, but the next steps were unclear. Rabbit, always the strategist, leaned forward with his hands clasped. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady but eager. "We've got an opening in the Charhollow area. The Circle of Flame has taken over the territory that used to be controlled by Ulf and his Ironborn gang. They're still vulnerable, and now's the time to strike before they can dig in their heels." Jack, ever the opportunist, raised an eyebrow, considering the implications. "You think we can push them out that easily?" he asked, his voice half doubtful, half challenging. The others exchanged looks, each one agreeing. The Circle had just made their move, and they had no idea just how far they were willing to go to solidify their hold. Harry, always the cautious one, crossed his arms, nodding in agreement. "It's a risky move, but if we wait too long, we lose the chance," he added, his tone thoughtful. "Exactly," Rabbit replied. "And besides, we're not just doing this for ourselves. We can reclaim a solid foothold for the crows in Charhollow, and if we bring Ulf into the fold, we've got the muscle to back us up." Jack leaned back, a sly smile playing on his lips. "That sounds like a plan. But if we're doing this, we need intel. We'll have to contact Ulf and arrange a meeting. He knows the area better than anyone. We can't afford to rush in blindly." The decision was made. The next day, they sent word to Ulf, and shortly after, a small, unexpected visitor arrived at their gates. Boquinha, the seemingly innocent 9-year-old Ironborn member, stood nervously at the entrance, glancing around the grounds as though unsure of her place. Her bright eyes shone with an unsettling sweetness, and her demeanor exuded the kind of innocence that would lull anyone into underestimating her. Jack stepped forward, offering her a warm smile, though his eyes remained sharp. "Boquinha," he greeted, leaning in slightly, his tone inviting yet curious. "Come on in. We'll talk in the garden." She hesitated but followed, stepping inside with a calculated reluctance. Jack led her through the garden, his pace slow as he studied her carefully. When they reached the garden, the rest of the crows gathered: Harlequina, Harry, Rabbit, and Constantine. Boquinha sat down, her posture still too stiff for a child, as if she were more accustomed to this kind of conversation than most. Rabbit wasted no time getting to the point. "We're planning to take back the area east of Charhollow. It's weak right now, and we need to act before the Circle of Flame can solidify their control," he began, his voice direct, as always. "We know Ulf's territory has been taken over. We're going to take it back, and we need to know what we're up against. You know that area better than anyone." Boquinha looked around at the group, her bright eyes calculating, as if taking their measure. She didn't seem fazed by the question, though she did take a moment to respond. "The Circle of Flames got a stronghold in the Assumption Church," she said, her tone soft but firm, like a child parroting a lesson they've heard too many times. "They've taken over the church, and they're using it as their base. I don't like the new priest, though. He's not like Father Tom." She paused, her gaze distant as though recalling something painful. "Father Tom was the real priest. He was good to us Ironborn kids, always helping us out. He was different, kind, always offering food and shelter to those in need. I liked him a lot." Her voice trailed off, but Jack could see the deep resentment in her eyes, even if her face remained innocent. "But now, there's this new priest. He doesn't care about us. He doesn't even talk to the kids. He's rude, and he's definitely working with the Circle." Rabbit nodded, glancing at the others as he processed the information. "So we take down the priest, take out the Circle's agents, and replace them with men we trust. We take the church for ourselves, and with it, control of the area." Harry spoke up, adjusting his glasses and looking at Boquinha with a cautious curiosity. "You're sure about this? That this priest is really with the Circle of Flame?" Boquinha nodded, her expression becoming momentarily stern. "I've seen it myself. He's got men posted around, and he's always with them. He's one of theirs. If you want to take that area, you'll need to get rid of him and his men first." Jack leaned in, his voice low and direct. "We're going to do this, but we'll need your help. Can you help us get inside, and take the priest down when the time comes?" Boquinha, without a hint of hesitation, smiled brightly. "Of course I can help," she said. "I know the church. I can lead you right to him." The group looked at each other, a mix of skepticism and resolve in their eyes. Rabbit was the first to speak. "All right. But we do this cleanly. No mistakes. And once the priest is gone, we replace him with men we can trust." Before they could discuss further, Boquinha looked up at them, her voice tinged with something that didn't quite match her age. "Are you really going through with this? You'll kill him, won't you?" she asked, her gaze flickering between them. Harry, trying to sound confident, nodded firmly. "Yes, we'll kill him. The circle of flame has to go." For a split second, Harry found himself questioning Boquinha's innocence. She sounded like a child, but something about the way she asked made him wonder, was this her true nature? Or was she hiding something more dangerous beneath that innocent exterior? He made a mental note to keep an eye on her. It was too easy to be fooled by appearances in Doskvol. Boquinha's smile widened, a hint of something far older than her years creeping into her eyes. "Good. Let's do it then," she said, her voice practically bubbling with enthusiasm. As the group prepared for the attack, Boquinha lingered by the door. Harry took a final look at her, still unsure of what to make of the girl. There was something off about her, something he couldn't quite put his finger on, but for now, the mission was the focus. He just had to trust that the crows could handle whatever was thrown their way. The sun hung low in the sky as the group assembled outside the Grand Assumption Church. It was bustling with activity, people gathering in the courtyard, speaking in hushed tones as the evening mass was about to begin. The air felt thick with anticipation as Harlequina stood with the others, observing the church. Its stone facade, weathered by time, seemed at odds with the solemn beauty of the place. Inside, the whispers of prayer echoed out, carried by the breeze. But there was no mistaking the tension in the air. Boquinha, small and seemingly innocent, stood with her arms crossed, her bright eyes scanning the scene. She looked over at the group and nodded, her voice soft but confident. "This is the best time," she said, her gaze flicking toward the entrance, where a procession of people was beginning to file in. "They won't question us if we're here for the service, especially with so many people." Rabbit Foot, ever the cautious one, raised an eyebrow. He studied the crowd before speaking. "Too many people. We could get lost in the shuffle, but it makes things messier. What if they spot us?" Boquinha's eyes narrowed as she glanced at the others, the faintest smile curling on her lips. "We'll blend in. Or, we can take a different route. The back door. I've used it before. Less attention." The crows exchanged glances. Rabbit Foot wasn't convinced. "The back door sounds more promising, but there's still the risk of running into trouble. We don't know who's watching." Jack, in his ironhook prison official disguise, adjusted his collar as he stepped forward. "I'll take the front. If I'm seen, I can pass for someone official. Rabbit, you're with me." Rabbit hesitated for a moment before nodding. "All right, we'll go through the front. But we keep it low. The moment it feels like we're being watched, we pull out." Boquinha nodded in agreement. "That's the plan. But we can't split up too much. It'll be easier if we keep some of us together." Her gaze shifted to Harry. "What about you?" Harry shifted nervously, running a hand through his hair. "I'll go around back. Might be more useful if I'm not right in the middle of everything." Harlequina, still taking in the scene, gave a small smile and turned to Boquinha. I'm with you. Let's get in through the back. If this goes south, I want to be in position to do something about it. Boquinha's eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and calculated confidence as she nodded. Let's move. Stick to the plan, and we'll be inside before they even know it. With that, they split. Jack and Rabbit headed toward the front entrance, walking confidently among the masses of churchgoers as they approached the main doors. Meanwhile, Harlequina and Boquinha made their way toward the back of the church. As they walked, Harlequina glanced at the young girl beside her. There was something unsettling about the way Boquinha moved, too calm, too self-assured for her age. The girl had hidden depths, and Harlequina couldn't shake the feeling that Boquinha was playing a dangerous game. The rear of the church was quieter, but no less tense. Harlequina kept her distance, staying hidden behind the corner of the building as she waited for Boquinha to make her move. The small girl stood outside the back door, her eyes flicking back toward Harlequina before she turned and called out to another child. Harlequina tensed, wondering what was about to unfold. The girl she had called over looked no older than 10, wearing ragged clothes that blended with the city's rougher streets. She nodded quickly and ran off, disappearing around the corner. Boquinha waited patiently, her hands clasped in front of her, barely moving. Harlequina couldn't help but watch her every move, sensing that the girl had something planned. A moment later, the other child returned, holding something small and squirming in her hands. It took Harlequina a moment to recognize it, a rat. She felt a knot twist in her stomach as she watched the girl slice open the rodent with a knife. Blood poured out onto her hands, a grotesque display that made Harlequina's stomach turn. The girl smeared the blood onto her palms with an unsettling calmness, her face a mask of focus. Harlequina's eyes widened in shock. She had no idea what Boquinha had in mind, but the intensity of this small act was chilling. Then, as the girl began to fake cry, her voice high and strained, Harlequina felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Boquinha, without skipping a beat, stepped up to the back door and knocked, her innocent demeanor still firmly in place. The door swung open, revealing a soldier, his uniform slightly askew, but the hardness in his eyes unmistakable. Harlequina's breath caught in her throat. There was something distinctly off about this man, something that screamed disdain. "What the hell do you want?" he snapped at Boquinha, his voice dripping with irritation. "Stop knocking and get lost. We don't have time for this." Boquinha didn't flinch, her face still a perfect mask of innocence. She pointed to the other girl, still crying on the ground, her bloodied hands held out. "Please," Boquinha said softly, her voice thick with feigned desperation. "She's hurt. She needs help." The soldier scowled, his eyes narrowing as he looked down at the crying girl. He sneered. "What, you think I'm supposed to believe this? You're just another filthy street rat, go find someone else to beg from." The soldier's disgust was clear. Harlequina watched as Boquinha continued, undeterred by the man's open hatred. "She's not faking," Boquinha insisted, her voice sweet but with a note of urgency. "Please, please help." The soldier gritted his teeth, his jaw clenched in irritation. "I don't want to deal with you, go play your games elsewhere." But as Boquinha took another step closer to him, something seemed to snap. He looked down at the girl, still kneeling and crying in the blood, and something softened in his demeanor, despite himself. "Fine," he growled, clearly against his better judgment. "I'll take a look at her." The man bent down, clearly annoyed, and reached for the girl, his eyes flashing with disdain as he began to inspect her. "Stupid little," that's when Boquinha struck. In a flash, she grabbed a brick from the ground, and with terrifying speed, she slammed it into the soldier's skull. The sound of impact was sickening, and the man staggered backward, dazed but still very much conscious. Boquinha didn't hesitate. She rushed him, knocking him down with a powerful shove, and in a moment of pure violence, she slammed the brick down again, knocking him into unconsciousness. Harlequina's heart pounded as she watched the scene unfold. She had expected trickery, but the speed and force with which Boquinha acted were chilling. The girl had a darkness in her, a side that Harlequina hadn't seen coming. She was a far cry from the innocent child she had appeared to be. But before Harlequina could process the shock, a second soldier emerged from the door, his eyes widening as he saw his comrade on the ground, blood trickling from his head. "Stop!" the soldier shouted, reaching for his weapon. "What the hell is going on out here?" Fear rippled through Harlequina's chest as she watched him draw a gun. She couldn't afford to wait any longer. With a sharp whistle, she sent her dog forward, ordering it to attack the soldier. The dog barked furiously, leaping at the soldier's legs as the man struggled to keep his balance. Meanwhile, Boquinha, now with blood on her hands, pressed forward, landing punch after punch on the soldier. The fight was brutal but swift. Boquinha's strength, despite her small frame, was astonishing. But the soldier wasn't completely out of the fight. As he fended off the dog and Boquinha's blows, Harlequina knew they needed to end this fast. Without a second thought, Harlequina pulled out the veil. The familiar dark fog spread quickly, encasing the area in a shadowy mist. Harlequina could see clearly inside the veil, but to anyone else, the world was pitch black. She rushed forward, using the cover of the veil to get close. In a moment of speed and precision, she knocked the soldier to the ground, just as Boquinha continued her assault on the other man. But the second soldier, realizing he was in danger, broke away from the fight and ran back into the church. Harlequina's heart sank as the opportunity slipped away. The veil's power was fading, and with it, their chance to finish the job cleanly. As the veil dissipated, Boquinha looked at Harlequina with a calm, almost indifferent expression. "We need to go inside now," she said coolly, motioning for Harlequina to follow her. Harlequina stood for a moment, catching her breath, still in disbelief over how quickly things had escalated. She followed Boquinha around the corner, trying to steady herself. Harlequina and Boquinha moved quickly, turning the corner of the church and approaching a high, stone wall that separated the private garden from the rest of the grounds. Without hesitation, Boquinha scrambled up the rough surface, her small hands finding footholds with ease. Harlequina followed, not bothering to question the sudden urgency of the situation. As she reached the top, Boquinha's hand shot down to help her over. Together, they leaped down into the quiet garden, the soft crunch of the ground beneath them barely audible over the muffled noise from inside the church. The garden was secluded, filled with overgrown hedges and sparse trees. The air smelled faintly of fresh earth and damp leaves, a stark contrast to the tension that buzzed between them. They moved quickly, their eyes scanning the surroundings until they spotted Harry, crouching behind a small bush near the edge of the garden. He looked up, startled for a second, before recognizing them. "Nice of you to join the party," Harry whispered, rising to his feet. "I've already got us a good look around." Boquinha, still not fully trusting the situation, kept her eyes on Harry as she listened. "What's the deal?" Harry gestured towards the far side of the garden, where a metal door stood, slightly ajar but clearly locked. "That door's been used frequently, look at the wear on the hinges." He paused, his brow furrowed. "I keep hearing shouting from inside, but it's not what you'd expect. These aren't the shouts of someone asking for help, but angry, authoritarian commands. Whoever's behind that door, they're not looking for assistance." Harlequina exchanged a glance with Boquinha, whose eyes were narrowing. "Do you think someone is locked in there?" Harlequina asked, her voice steady. Harry shook his head. "I don't know. But whatever's going on behind that door, it doesn't sound like anyone is in distress." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "I've been trying to make out the words, but they're too muffled. It's hard to tell what they're saying, but it sounds like some kind of power struggle." Harlequina nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. We'll have to investigate that later." She turned to Boquinha, who had been listening intently. We had a brief encounter with some of the soldiers before we got here, Harlequina continued. They weren't exactly friendly, but I managed to find a set of keys on one of them. Looks like they'll work on that door. Boquinha's eyes widened in disbelief. Keys? When did you have time to grab those? She asked sharply, suspicion creeping into her voice. Harlequina gave a small smirk, one that was both sly and reassuring. I'm very quick at what I do, she replied smoothly, her tone nonchalant as if the question was insignificant. But Boquinha didn't seem entirely convinced. She studied Harlequina for a moment, her gaze shifting to the keys now held firmly in the woman's hand. I wasn't aware you were so prepared, Boquinha muttered, but Harlequina didn't respond, her focus already shifting back to the door in front of them. As the silence stretched between them, Harlequina suddenly heard a voice, Jack's voice, crackling through a small device. Her expression shifted instantly. She could hear the panic in his tone, a sharp contrast to the cool, collected vibe she had maintained just moments before. Harlequina. Jack's voice called out from the earpiece. I need help. I'm in trouble. Without a second thought, Harlequina's face hardened with determination. I'm going, she said abruptly, her voice low but firm. She looked to Boquinha and Harry, her eyes narrowing slightly. You two stay here. Don't open that door until the rest of the group is back. Understand? Harry gave a quick nod, his brow furrowing. You sure you want us to stay back? What if there's something we need to do? Harlequina shot him a quick glance. Trust me, I'll handle whatever Jack's gotten himself into. You've got the keys, and I trust you'll be smart enough not to go in there by yourselves. Boquinha crossed her arms, her eyes still lingering on Harlequina. She didn't say anything but seemed skeptical of Harlequina's words. Her suspicion was thick in the air, though she made no move to argue. She simply nodded, watching Harlequina walk briskly toward the exit of the garden, disappearing into the shadows. As everything unfolded behind the church with Harlequina, Boquinha, and Harry, Jack and Rabbit made their way through the front entrance. The doors creaked open, and the church greeted them with the sound of murmured conversations and the scent of incense. The interior was vast, its high arches creating an atmosphere of reverence, and the pews were rapidly filling with people eager for the Mass. But Rabbit's nerves were on edge. The sheer number of people and the casualness of it all made him feel exposed, like they were too easily blending in. Casualty could occur today. And he knew it. His eyes scanned the crowd, settling on a pair of men standing near the entrance. They were too brute-looking, too imposing, too familiar. Rabbit's gut twisted. He recognized them from the previous encounters with the Circle of Flame. It was them. They couldn't risk being spotted now, not when they were so close to their objective. They needed to act like they belonged. Jack seemed to be less concerned with blending in and more focused on gathering information. He approached the elderly woman standing at the reception, flashing his usual disarming smile. He started with small talk, asking about the service and the Mass, his voice low and smooth, his demeanor friendly. Jack knew how to manipulate a conversation, draw out just the right amount of information without revealing too much of himself. Eventually, Jack casually mentioned he was an official from Iron Hook Prison, needing to speak with Father Tom about some upcoming confession sessions at the prison. The elderly woman smiled, though her eyes were shadowed with worry. I'm sorry to say, Father Tom's been out sick, she replied, her voice quiet. Nobody's seen him lately. He only communicates by letter now. But we have a substitute priest while he's away. Jack nodded with feigned understanding, keeping his tone neutral. I see. Well, could I meet the substitute after the Mass? Of course, she said, with a reassuring nod. Stay around, and after the Mass, I'll make sure you meet him. While Jack kept the woman distracted with small talk, Rabbit scanned the space for a more direct way in. His eyes darted around before settling on a back door, partially concealed behind a large pillar. The church workers, busy with preparations, didn't pay him any mind. He approached the door and, with a quick glance over his shoulder, pulled out a lock-picking set. With quiet efficiency, Rabbit managed to pick the lock and ease the door open, slipping inside. The room beyond was dark, damp, and filled with the musty smell of old furniture and forgotten things. It was a storage room, and Rabbit sighed in frustration. There was nothing of value here, just crates and shelves stacked with mass supplies and even non-alcoholic wine for the sacrament. A dead end. But as he turned to leave, he heard something, a soft shuffle of footsteps from deeper in the building. Curiosity piqued, Rabbit moved cautiously toward the sound, his hand on his knife. The footsteps grew louder as he neared a small hallway that led into another room. Rabbit's sharp eyes noticed a shadow moving, and then, he saw him, a large man, standing still, clearly a soldier from the circle of flame. He carried a gun. Rabbit's heart raced. This was trouble. Without thinking twice, Rabbit grabbed an empty bottle from a nearby crate and threw it across the room, watching it crash loudly against the floor. The soldier jerked, his head snapping in the direction of the noise. It was enough of a distraction for Rabbit to move in. He lunged at the man, knife aimed for the throat, but the soldier was faster, spinning around and blocking Rabbit's strike with the barrel of his gun. The two men struggled, each trying to overpower the other. Rabbit had the agility, but the soldier had the strength. The soldier slammed his body into Rabbit, sending him crashing into the wall with a grunt. Rabbit tried to recover quickly, but the man was already on him, grabbing his wrist and twisting it sharply. Rabbit gasped in pain, dropping his knife. With a swift blow, the soldier knocked Rabbit out, sending him crumpling to the ground. As Rabbit's vision blurred, he heard the soldier mutter something about needing to report back. The soldier quickly went through Rabbit's pockets, rifling through his belongings. He found the Millennium Ring, an item thought to be lost to the world of Doskvol. A powerful artifact, now in the hands of someone like Rabbit. The soldier's lips curled into a grin. He knew his boss would be thrilled with this find. The soldier pocketed the ring, then dragged Rabbit's unconscious body into a corner, out of sight. He wasn't sure who the man was or why he was here, but he now knew that the crows were behind the attack on the church. Outside, Jack began to grow anxious. It had been longer than expected. Rabbit hadn't checked in, and something didn't sit right with him. Jack spotted one of the larger men, the brute he had been eyeing earlier, standing near the front of the church. He approached him casually, offering a friendly smile. "Hey, you got a smoke?" Jack asked, leaning in closer, his tone relaxed. "Haven't had one all morning." The man grunted, eyeing Jack suspiciously. "You a kid or something? Who are you?" Jack's smile widened, but the man's suspicion wasn't something he could ignore. The tension was palpable, and Jack knew things could go sideways quickly. He tried to keep the conversation light, but when the man stepped back with a hostile look, Jack's patience snapped. Without warning, Jack attacked, slamming his fist into the man's gut and following up with a punch to the jaw. The man stumbled back, drawing his gun. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted, but it was too late. Jack had already disarmed him, knocking the gun away with a swift kick. The commotion outside startled the people preparing for mass. Fear spread quickly through the crowd as Jack fought the soldier, a chaotic scene unfolding right in front of the church. Jack knew he needed help. He quickly sent a message to Harlequina, his heart racing. "Harlequina. I need help. I'm in trouble." As the sounds of the fight grew louder, the situation spiraled out of control. The churchgoers were scattering, and Jack was now in deep heat. He was outnumbered, and the threat of more soldiers arriving was too real. Harlequina's help couldn't come soon enough. The fight Jack had picked quickly escalated beyond his control. In no time, he was surrounded by three powerful men, all clearly from the circle of flame. They weren't here to negotiate, they were here to kill. Their faces were set in grim determination, and the weight of their brutality was palpable. The odds were stacked against him, and Jack knew it was only a matter of time before the situation turned deadly. That's when Harlequina burst through a side door, her entrance marked by the sharp clatter of combat boots hitting the ground. Without hesitation, she joined the fray, taking on one of the soldiers with a vicious series of strikes. Jack's chances had just improved, but they were still outnumbered. He scanned the battlefield, his mind racing. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something, a glint of an object in his pocket, the trinket he had taken from Tricerium's house, the very one he hadn't fully understood. With a devil-may-care grin, Jack pulled the bottle from his jacket and unscrewed the cap. A thick, acrid vapor poured from the bottle, swirling around him like a storm cloud. As it surrounded him, Jack felt a surge of raw power, an energy unlike anything he'd ever felt before. His muscles tensed, and a strange clarity filled his mind. Instinctively, he pointed a finger toward the nearest soldier, and before he could even fully comprehend what was happening, a bolt of pure lightning shot from his hand, crackling through the air and hitting the large soldier square in the chest. The man crumpled instantly, knocked unconscious by the brutal shock. The feeling was intoxicating. Jack could feel the power coursing through him, humming in his veins. It was almost overwhelming, and as the surge of electricity seemed to grow inside him, Jack couldn't resist. He aimed again, this time at another soldier, his finger sending another jagged bolt of lightning arcing through the air. The second man dropped to the floor, twitching slightly from the force of the strike. But then, Jack felt it, a strange and almost uncontrollable buildup of power, threatening to spill out of him. Without thinking, he pointed his hand at a nearby wall and discharged the remaining energy. The bolt of lightning slammed into the stone, causing cracks to spider across the surface. The sheer force of it left the room reverberating with the aftermath. Harlequina, having knocked out one of the other soldiers, turned to Jack in surprise. Her eyes widened in astonishment as she surveyed the chaos around them, the bodies of the soldiers lying unconscious or writhing from the electrical barrage. "What was that?" she asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and admiration. Jack grinned, his chest still heaving from the adrenaline. "I stole it from the old man's house," he said casually, still adjusting to the new surge of power in his system. "Had no idea what it did, but damn, I love magic." Harlequina raised an eyebrow, her sharp mind quickly processing what had just happened. "I think I understand Harry's fascination with magic now," she murmured, half to herself. As the battle began to settle, Harlequina moved quickly to check the pockets of the fallen soldiers, gathering anything of value. Meanwhile, Jack, eager to keep the momentum going, dashed into the church to finish off any remaining circle of flame soldiers and, most importantly, find Rabbit Foot. The noise of the struggle had already attracted attention, and Jack's heart raced as he moved through the corridors, searching for their missing comrade. But Harlequina's voice cut through the noise, stopping him dead in his tracks. "Jack," she called out, her voice full of shock. Jack turned back to see her holding something in her hand, her expression frozen in horror. Her blood seemed to run cold as she stared at the items she had pulled from one of the soldiers' pockets. Among the typical trinkets and weapons, there was something far more troubling, Rabbit Foot's possessions. Including the Millennium Ring. Jack's stomach dropped. The Millennium Ring, the most powerful artifact they had. The one they thought Rabbit Foot had, and the one that no one, especially the Circle of Flame, should ever have access to. Harlequina's face tightened with a mix of disbelief and anger as the realization hit her, they had come this close to losing it. Worse, it almost ended up in the hands of the very people they were trying to take down. "Rabbit is down," Harlequina muttered, her grip tightening around the ring. How could they get him? Her voice was cold with fury. Jack's mind raced as he took in the full extent of the situation. "We need to get this ring back to Rabbit," Jack said, his voice grim. "But for now, let's finish this. Let's find Rabbit, and regroup." Harlequina nodded, her eyes hardening as she surveyed the room. "First, we deal with this mess. Then, we figure out what the hell we're dealing with. Back with Harry and Boquinha. The tension in the air was thick as Harry and Boquinha waited by the door. Boquinha's impatience was palpable. She kept pacing in front of the locked metal door, casting occasional glances at Harry, her eyes filled with barely concealed frustration. She demanded, more forcefully each time, that Harry open the door, her tone a mix of authority and annoyance. "No more waiting, Potter. Open the damn door now," she said, her voice dripping with venom. Harry, ever the loyal member of the Crows, held firm, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Not until Harlequina comes back," he said calmly, his voice betraying no hint of fear despite the pressure Boquinha was putting on him. Boquinha's patience snapped. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing dangerously. In a swift motion, she pulled a gleaming knife from her belt and pointed it directly at Harry, her act of innocence completely discarded. "I said open it, now," she hissed, her voice low and threatening. Harry's eyes flickered, his suspicion now confirmed. She had been pretending this whole time. What had once seemed like an innocent girl, asking for help, now revealed herself as something far more dangerous. The air around them seemed to grow heavier, and Harry remained calm, keeping his distance. Without warning, Harry made his move. With a flick of his wrist, he cast a quick spell and vanished into thin air. He moved silently, slipping behind Boquinha and observing her reaction from the shadows. Boquinha paused for a moment, her expression one of confusion. She turned, slashing through the air with her knife, trying to catch the invisible form of Harry. "What the hell?" she muttered, her voice sharp. "Where did you go, Potter?" Harry stayed completely still, barely breathing, watching her every move. It didn't take long for her to come to a conclusion. "Are you coming or not?" she muttered aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "I have him." Harry's heart skipped a beat. Boquinha wasn't talking to herself, she was communicating with someone. She turned her head upward, and Harry's eyes narrowed as a crow swooped down from the trees, landing next to her. Harry didn't need to be told who it was. The bird's familiar black feathers and piercing eyes could only belong to one creature, Silas Thorne's pet, the cipher agent's companion. The connection between them, the rumored mental link, made it clear that Boquinha wasn't working alone. "Get your ass down here now, Silas," Boquinha said, her voice cool and composed. "He's really here, I knew it wasn't just rumors. He's ours now." Harry stood frozen for a moment, piecing together what was happening. Silas Thorne, the same cipher agent who had worked with the Crows in the past, was involved in this mission. He hadn't been expecting this twist, but now everything started to fall into place. The ciphers weren't just neutral bystanders in this mess, they had their own agenda. As Harry watched, Boquinha calmly bent down to work on the lock. Her nimble fingers worked with precision, and in seconds, the door creaked open. She stepped inside, and Harry, still invisible, followed closely behind. The room beyond the door shocked him. Lying in a makeshift hospital bed, surrounded by various medical equipment and a dim light, was none other than Firefly. The same Firefly who had led the attack against the Ironborn orphanage. The same Firefly who was presumed dead after the explosion that had nearly torn the orphanage apart. But here he was, scarred and burned beyond recognition, one of his legs completely missing. Despite his injuries, he was still breathing, still alive, and, to Harry's horror, still barking orders at those around him. He wasn't asking for help. He wasn't begging for mercy. He was furious, yelling orders at anyone who would listen, demanding to know what was happening outside. "Where the hell is everyone?" he shouted, his voice hoarse but filled with power and authority. "What's going on out there?" Boquinha took a slow, careful step toward the bed. The light hit her face, and for the first time, Firefly's furious gaze met hers. His eyes narrowed in recognition, and his face twisted into a grimace. "You." Firefly spat, his words laced with venom. "I should have known. You, filthy little brat. Boquinha didn't flinch. Her expression remained cool, calculating. She didn't react to his insults, as if they meant nothing to her. Do you have any idea what's going to happen to you now, Firefly? Boquinha asked, her voice smooth, calm, and unsettlingly collected. Before Firefly could respond, a second figure emerged from the shadows, Silas Thorn. He stepped into the light, his face contorted with fury, his eyes blazing with rage. He had clearly been waiting for this moment. Firefly's hatred boiled over. His weakened body strained against the bed, and his voice came out in a hoarse roar. Silas Thorn. You're really here to finish this, huh? You think I'm just gonna die like this? I'm not just here to finish you, Firefly, Silas growled. I'm here to make sure you never hurt anyone again. Silas' hands clenched into fists, but he held his rage back, speaking through gritted teeth. My friend, Adrian Blackwood, you killed him. And now, I'm going to make you pay for that. You're going to die today, Firefly. You and your boss are going to get what's coming to you. Firefly let out a harsh laugh, still struggling in the bed. You think I'm afraid of you? After everything I've been through? You can't kill me, you can't even touch me. I'll make sure you regret ever coming here. Harry stepped forward, finally dropping the invisibility spell and reappearing in the room. He knew that this would be the moment things would start to get complicated. Boquinha's eyes flicked toward Harry, her face momentarily registering surprise. Silas's reaction was faster, as he immediately raised a gun, pointing it directly at Harry, but before he could pull the trigger, Harry raised his hands in a show of calm surrender. Don't shoot, Harry said, his voice steady. I'm not here to fight you. Silas and Boquinha both hesitated, their eyes narrowing as they sized Harry up. Firefly, on the other hand, sneered, his face contorted with pure hatred. You think I care who you are, kid? Firefly spat. Insects. All of you are the same. Harry smirked, his face cold. I don't care if you remember me, Firefly. But you're going to hear me loud and clear now. The game is over. You lost. Firefly's eyes burned with pure hate as he struggled to rise from the bed. Crows, he spat again, his voice thick with venom. You're all going to die too. Harry grinned, his eyes flashing with determination. That's where you're wrong. Without hesitation, Harry pulled out a gun, aimed it squarely at Firefly's forehead, and shot. The deafening crack of the gunshot echoed through the room. Firefly's body jerked violently before collapsing back onto the bed, lifeless. The first kill of Harry's life, his heart raced, adrenaline shooting through his veins as he stared at the fallen leader. It had happened so quickly. There was no turning back now. The job was done. This area, this territory, was now theirs. Silas and Boquinha exchanged a brief glance, both still processing what had just happened. The young girl, ever the picture of calm, broke the silence. Well, Boquinha said, her voice cool, that still achieves our goals, so it's fine by me. She shrugged, as if she had no care for the violence that had just unfolded before her, but Silas wasn't as indifferent. He stepped forward, his eyes cold and sharp as he grabbed Boquinha by the arms, holding her in place. Don't play games with me, kid, Silas growled, his voice a low warning. Your innocent act never worked with us ciphers. I did my job by keeping watch and preventing more damage than you could take. Now tell me where they are. Boquinha's eyes met his, a silent challenge flickering between them. For a moment, she seemed to consider her options, weighing whether or not to trust the man. But in the end, she exhaled slowly, dropping her guard just enough to give him the information he wanted. You already knew where they were, if you thought about it for a minute, Boquinha replied with a sly smile. But fine. Our group is kinda everywhere right now, ever since the attack at the base. Those two, she gestured vaguely, are being taken care of by Jackie Combier of the Unseen, in the Deadlands hideout. Silas's face shifted as he processed this. He knew exactly what that meant. Harry, on the other hand, was left in the dark, his mind buzzing with questions. Silas turned on his heel to leave, the conversation over for him, but Harry couldn't let it go. "What were you two talking about?" Harry asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Who is he after?" Boquinha paused, her gaze flicking over Harry as if weighing whether or not to trust him with the answer. She didn't seem eager to reveal more, but after a long moment of silence, she finally spoke. "He was looking for the Blackwood twins," she said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "They're the kids of Adrian Blackwood. Silas thinks it's his responsibility to take care of them after he couldn't do anything but watch his friend die at the Iceberg Lounge. I'm sure you know that story, right? Rumors say the crows were there too." "There sure are a lot of rumors in Doskvol," Harry muttered. Boquinha smiled slightly, as if amused by his response. "Good luck, kid," she said casually. "You guys did a good job today. Take the area, if you must. Ulf doesn't want it back." She turned to leave, but Harry's voice stopped her. "We need your help to leave safely." Boquinha flashed him a knowing smile, the look of a child pretending to be innocent in a world that was anything but. "Goodbye, Harry." Without another word, she slipped out of the room and disappeared into the shadows of the church. Harry stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of what had just been revealed. Then, pushing those thoughts aside, he headed back into the church to meet up with Jack and the others. Inside, Jack was already pulling Rabbit Foot out from the shadows, helping him to his feet. Rabbit had been knocked unconscious, but Jack had found him in time and revived him. Harlequina, ever the pragmatist, handed Rabbit back his belongings, a slight smirk on her face. "Take better care of these next time, Rabbit." Rabbit looked at his items with a sigh. "I will," he grumbled, rubbing his head where the blow had landed. Jack was quick to bring the group together. "All right, time to wrap this up. We need to get out of here, but we're taking one of those soldiers with us," he said, his tone serious. "We need answers, and I want to know where Father Tom is." Rabbit nodded in agreement. "Good plan. But I'm staying behind," he added, raising a hand. "I've already been attacked today. I'll blend in as one of the attendees. I'll keep control of the story, make sure the crows don't get the full blame for this mess." Harlequina gave him a sharp look, but didn't protest. "Fine. Just make sure we're not blamed for anything else." The group agreed on the plan and quickly prepared to leave, splitting up in different directions to avoid drawing attention to themselves. Harry, Jack, and Harlequina made their way out of the church, but before they left, they made sure to grab one of the soldiers who had survived. They needed information, and this was their only way to get it. As they exited, they looked at each other, the weight of the day's events settling in. It was over for now, but something told them that this wasn't the last of what the Circle of Flame had in store for them. The group parted ways, their hearts heavy with what had transpired, but with the firm knowledge that they had gained control of the territory, for now. The crows were gaining power, and they wouldn't stop until Doskvol was theirs.